I opened the barn doors expecting dust and cobwebs. Instead, I found a woman who claimed she'd been waiting 18 years for me. Before we dive into this story, hit that subscribe button real quick. Tomorrow, I'm sharing something that'll absolutely blow your mind, and you won't want to miss it. I was 21 years old when I aged out of Harmony House, standing on the front steps with a garbage bag full of clothes and exactly $43 to my name. 13 years in the system had taught me not to expect much from life. So when the social worker handed me a thick envelope with a law firm's return address, I almost didn't open it. "This came for you last week," Mrs. Chen said, her expression unreadable. "From an attorney in Montana. You should probably read it before you go." Inside was a letter informing me that my maternal grandmother, Rose Sullivan, had passed away 4 months earlier at the age of 82. I had no memory of her. My mother had died when I was 8, and I'd gone straight into foster care with no other family stepping forward. The letter explained that Rose had left me property in rural Montana, a barn on 3 acres of land, along with a small savings account containing $15,000. $15,000. I read that part 3 times. It was more money than I'd ever imagined having. In the foster system, I'd learned to count my wealth in single digits. A $5 bill felt like a fortune. This was incomprehensible. The attorney, a man named David Morrison, requested that I contact his office to arrange the property transfer. There was also a strange notation at the bottom of the letter. "Please arrange to visit the property in person before making any decisions regarding its future." This is critical. That word, critical, kept echoing in my mind. What could be so critical about an empty barn in Montana? I called the number immediately, my hands shaking as I dialed. Mr. Morrison answered on the second ring, his voice warm but professional. "Ah, Maya, I've been hoping to hear from you. Your grandmother was very specific about her wishes." "I don't understand," I said. "Why would she leave me anything? I never even met her. I didn't even know she existed until 10 minutes ago." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and I could hear papers rustling. "That's a complicated story, and one I think is best explained when you come to Montana. I've been authorized to purchase a plane ticket for you and arrange temporary accommodation. When can you travel?" "You're authorized to buy me a plane ticket?" I repeated, stunned. "I've never been on a plane in my life." "Then this will be an adventure," Mr. Morrison said gently. "Your grandmother set aside funds specifically for this. She wanted to make sure you could come, regardless of your financial situation." 3 days later, I was on my first airplane, watching the landscape change from the flat plains I'd grown up in to the dramatic mountains of Montana. My hands gripped the armrest during takeoff, and the woman next to me smiled sympathetically. "First time flying?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Montana's beautiful," she said. "You'll love it." I wanted to tell her I wasn't going for tourism, that I was flying toward a grandmother's mystery and a life I couldn't begin to imagine. But instead, I just nodded again and watched the clouds. Mr. Morrison met me at the tiny regional airport, a tall man in his 60s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. He looked exactly like I'd imagined a Montana lawyer would look, wearing a button-down shirt, jeans, and boots that had seen real work. Your grandmother was an extraordinary woman, he said as we drove through winding mountain roads. She lived alone on that property for over 40 years. Very private, very particular about her wishes. She came to my office 2 years ago and spent 3 hours explaining exactly how this day should go. What do you mean, how this day should go? I asked, watching pine trees blur past the window. You'll understand soon, he said cryptically. The property was about 30 miles outside the small town of Whitefish, down a dirt road that seemed to go on forever. When we finally arrived, I saw a modest, single-wide trailer home that had seen better years, and about 50 yards away, a massive red barn that looked like it had been maintained with meticulous care. The contrast was striking. The trailer was weathered and tired, but the barn looked like it could have been painted yesterday. The trailer is functional, Mr. Morrison explained. Your grandmother lived there. She was never one for luxury or comfort, but it's the barn that's really the heart of this property. That's where she put all her energy, all her resources. We walked across the overgrown grass toward the barn. It was huge, probably 60 feet long and 40 feet wide, with fresh paint and a solid roof. I could see new shingles, professionally installed, and the doors looked like they'd been recently replaced. This wasn't just maintenance. This was serious investment. Mr. Morrison pulled out a key ring and began unlocking what appeared to be multiple locks on the main door. 3 separate deadbolts, each with its own key. Before we go in, he said, turning to face me, I need you to understand something. Your grandmother made me promise that I would bring you here personally, that I would be with you when you first entered this barn. She also made me promise to tell you that everything inside is yours, but that you need to make a choice about what to do with it. That choice needs to be made carefully and with compassion. You're scaring me, I said, my heart pounding. What's in there? Is it dangerous? Not dangerous, he said, just unexpected. Your grandmother spent the last 18 years of her life protecting what's inside this barn. She trusted me to help you understand why. He pulled open the heavy doors, and we stepped inside. The interior of the barn had been completely converted into a living space, but not for animals or storage. It was a studio apartment, fully furnished and clearly inhabited. There was a small kitchen area with a stove, refrigerator, and sink, a bathroom behind a partition, a bed in one corner with a handmade quilt, bookshelves lining the walls filled with hundreds of books, a comfortable-looking couch facing a wood stove, rugs on the floor, pictures on the walls. This wasn't storage. This was a home. And sitting on that couch, looking up at us with tears streaming down her face, was a woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, and her face was a mixture of hope and terror. "Oh, my God," the woman whispered. "Maya, you're here. You're actually here." I grabbed Mr. Morrison's arm, backing toward the door. "What is this? Who is she? What's going on?" The woman stood slowly, her hands raised as if to show she meant no harm. "Please don't run. Please. I know this is shocking, but your grandmother wanted you to meet me. She wanted you to know the truth before she died, but she was too afraid of what might happen to me." Mr. Morrison cleared his throat. "Maya, this is Sarah. She's been living in this barn for 18 years. Your grandmother took care of her all this time, kept her safe, kept her hidden." "I don't understand," I said, my voice rising. Why? Who is she? Why would my grandmother hide someone in a barn? Sarah's face crumpled and she sat back down heavily. Her hands were trembling. I'm your sister. Your older sister. Half-sister, technically. Same mother, different fathers. The world tilted sideways. I felt Mr. Morrison's hand on my elbow, steadying me. That's impossible. My mother didn't have other children. Social services would have known. There would have been records. They didn't know about me, Sarah interrupted. Nobody did except your grandmother and your mother. When your mom died, I was 16 years old and living on the streets. I'd run away from my father when I was 14 because he was hurting me, beating me, worse. Your mom had taken me in secretly, let me hide at her apartment. But when she died suddenly, I had nowhere to go. Mr. Morrison gestured for me to sit in a chair near the door, probably sensing I was about to collapse. Let Sarah tell you the whole story. That's what Rose wanted. Sarah wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. Your mom was the only person who'd ever protected me. My dad was a monster. He told everyone I'd run away to live with my mom when I was 14. But the truth was, I ran away from him. Your mom found me sleeping behind a dumpster and brought me home. She said she couldn't legally take custody because she wasn't married to my dad anymore, and he'd fight it. So she just hid me. For 2 years, I lived in her apartment, and nobody knew. I remembered so little about my mother. She died in a car accident when I was 8, and my memories of her were fragmented. Her laugh, the way she made pancakes on Sunday mornings, the songs she sang while doing dishes. But I'd never known about Sarah. When your mom died, I panicked, Sarah continued. I knew social services would come for you. I knew they'd ask questions, and I was terrified that if anyone official found me, they'd send me back to my father. So I ran. I lived on the streets for months, stealing food, sleeping wherever I could. Eventually, I ended up in Montana, just trying to get as far away as possible. I broke into this barn one winter night, she said, her voice breaking. It was December, and the temperature had dropped below zero. I was freezing and desperate, and I saw the property looked abandoned from the road. The trailer was dark. I thought maybe I could sleep here for one night, just to not die in the cold. But your grandmother found me the next morning. Instead of calling the police, Rose made me coffee and asked me my story. When I mentioned your mother's name, Jennifer, Rose started crying. She'd been estranged from your mom for years over some family argument I never fully understood. Something about Rose disapproving of your dad, about harsh words that were never taken back. She didn't even know your mom had died until I told her. And when I said there was another daughter, you, who'd gone into foster care, it broke her heart. Sarah stood and walked to a box on one of the bookshelves, pulling out a photo album. Her hands were shaking as she opened it. Rose went to try to get custody of you. She hired lawyers, filled out paperwork, drove 8 hours to meet with social workers. But she was 74 years old and living alone on this remote property. The system deemed her too old and the location too isolated for a child. They rejected her application. I remembered Mrs. Chen at Harmony House mentioning something years ago about a relative trying to claim me, but I'd been told they were unsuitable. That had been my grandmother. She'd tried. Rose came back from that rejection devastated, Sarah said. She showed me the paperwork, the official denials, and she cried for hours. But then she made me a promise. She said if the system wouldn't let her save you, she'd save me instead. She let me live here in the barn. She spent thousands of dollars converting it into this apartment, brought me food every week, paid for me to get my GED online, even helped me go to community college through correspondence courses. Why didn't she tell anyone? I asked. Why keep you hidden? Because I was terrified, Sarah said simply. I was still a minor when she found me, 17 years old, and I was convinced that if anyone official knew where I was, they'd send me back to my father. The law said I belonged to him until I turned 18. Rose agreed to keep my presence here a secret. She told everyone the barn was storage, that nobody should come here. She put up all those locks. As I got older and turned 18, then 20, then 30, it just became our way of life. This barn became my home. Rose became my family. And the secret became so big that neither of us knew how to undo it. What happens next changed everything I thought I knew about family. Keep watching and make sure you're subscribed because you won't believe where this goes. Mr. Morrison pulled out a folder from his briefcase. Your grandmother left very specific instructions. The property is yours, Maya, but she wanted you to understand Sarah's situation before deciding what to do with it. Sarah has been living here for 18 years. This is her home. Rose spent the last 2 decades of her life protecting her. Now that responsibility falls to you if you choose to accept it. I looked at Sarah, really looked at her, and saw something familiar in her eyes. The same hazel color as mine, the same shape to her face that I saw in the mirror every morning, the same way her left eyebrow lifted slightly higher than the right when she was nervous. I have a sister, I whispered. You have a sister, Sarah confirmed, her voice breaking, and I've wanted to meet you for 18 years. Rose showed me pictures of you that she'd get from social services updates. She'd drive to town once a month and call your caseworkers, pretending to be checking on her granddaughter's welfare. They'd give her basic information, what school you were in, if you'd changed placements. She'd come back and tell me everything. I watched you grow up in photographs and secondhand stories. I knew when you changed foster homes, when you had a hard year in 7th grade, when you smiled in your 8th grade photo, even though Rose said you just had a rough placement. The emotions were too much. Anger at being kept in the dark, grief for the grandmother I'd never known, confusion about what I was supposed to do, and, underneath it all, a desperate longing for the family I'd never had. Why now? I asked, my voice cracking. Why did she wait until she died to tell me? Mr. Morrison answered that. Rose was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 years ago. She spent her remaining time putting her affairs in order. She told me that she'd made many mistakes in her life, pushing away your mother, failing to get custody of you, keeping Sarah's existence secret. She said she couldn't fix most of those mistakes, but she could give you both a chance to know each other. She was terrified that if she told you while she was alive, you might reject Sarah out of anger at being deceived. She hoped that meeting Sarah directly, seeing how she'd lived, might help you understand. She wanted you to have a choice, Sarah added. The property is legally yours. You can sell it, and I'll move on. I'm 34 years old. I have a job in town at the library that I can get to by bike. I've been saving money for years, just in case this day came. I'm not your responsibility. Rose left you that money and this land so you'd have options, and she didn't want you to feel obligated to me. But as I looked around the barn at the life Sarah had built here, at the books lining the walls and the small herb garden I could see through the window, at the photographs of her and Rose together scattered throughout the space, at the simple but dignified life she'd created, I realized something. I'd spent my entire life feeling like I didn't belong anywhere, like I was temporary and unwanted. And here was a sister I'd never known about who'd been living in hiding, also feeling unwanted and temporary. "I'm not selling," I said suddenly. This is this is family property. You've been living here for 18 years. This is your home." Sarah's face crumpled again. "You don't have to." "I want to," I interrupted. "But I need time to process all of this. Can I can I stay in the trailer for a while? Get to know you? Figure out what comes next?" Mr. Morrison looked relieved. "That's exactly what Rose hoped you'd say. The trailer is fully furnished and functional. I'll help you get set up." Over the next few weeks, Sarah and I began the awkward process of becoming sisters. She'd come to the trailer for coffee in the mornings, and we'd talk about our lives. She told me about her abusive childhood, about how our mother had saved her, about the guilt she'd felt for years about being alive while I was in the foster system. "I wanted Rose to try harder to get you," Sarah admitted one morning. "I begged her to, but she said the system had made their decision, and fighting it would just draw attention to me. She was protecting me, but I felt guilty about it every single day. I'd lie awake at night in that barn, wondering what you were going through, wondering if you were safe, wondering if you hated me even though you didn't know I existed. I told her about Harmony House, about the revolving door of foster homes before that, about feeling invisible and unwanted. I used to imagine that I had family somewhere looking for me," I said. "I never imagined it would be like this. I never imagined there was a sister living in a barn in Montana, hiding from the world." Sarah showed me around the property, pointing out the trails through the woods that she'd walked thousands of times, the small creek where she'd learned to fish, the spot where Rose was buried under a simple stone marker that read Rose Sullivan, 1942 to 2024. She loved fiercely and protected faithfully. "She wanted to be here," Sarah said as we stood at the grave. "She said this land was her piece, and she wanted to stay part of it. We buried her on a Tuesday morning, just me and Mr. Morrison and the pastor from town who'd known her for 40 years. Nobody else knew about me, so nobody else came." I knelt down and touched the stone, feeling connected to a woman I'd never met, but who'd shaped my life anyway. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for trying. Thank you for saving my sister." One evening, about a month after I'd arrived, Sarah invited me to dinner in the barn. She'd cooked an elaborate meal, roasted chicken, vegetables from her garden, homemade bread that filled the space with warmth. As we ate, she told me about her job at the library and her dream of maybe going back to school for a master's degree in library science. "But that would mean leaving here," she said, looking around the barn with obvious affection. "And I don't know if I can do that. This place saved my life. These walls protected me when nothing else could." "What if you didn't have to leave?" I asked. "What if we made this work somehow? What if we figured out how to both have lives here?" We started planning that night. The property had 3 acres, enough space for both of us to have privacy. We could keep the barn as Sarah's home and renovate the trailer to be more comfortable for me. The $15,000 Rose had left could go toward improvements and maybe helping Sarah with school expenses. We could be a family, Sarah said quietly. A weird, unconventional family, but a family. I've never had one of those, I admitted. A family, I mean, not a real one. Me neither, not until Rose. And she was terrified the whole time that someone would find out about me and take me away. She never fully relaxed, never fully trusted that I was safe. I think that fear is what killed her, honestly, the constant stress of keeping such a big secret. We filed paperwork to make Sarah's residence legal. She'd been living off the grid for so long that she had to essentially reestablish her identity. She had no credit history, no tax records for years, no official proof of where she'd been. Mr. Morrison helped us navigate the legal complexities, working with Social Security offices and government agencies to bring Sarah back into the system without triggering investigations into why she'd been missing. Within 6 months, Sarah officially existed again in the eyes of the government. She got a Social Security card, a driver's license, and started paying taxes on her library income. I got a job in Whitefish at a cafe called The Morning Grind, and Sarah continued her work at the library. We fell into a routine of shared dinners and separate evenings, of slowly learning each other's habits and histories. It wasn't always easy. We were essentially strangers trying to build a relationship based on biology and circumstance. But gradually it became real. Sarah taught me to identify birds and plants on the property. I helped her apply for financial aid for grad school. We spent evenings watching old movies on Sarah's laptop and arguing good-naturedly about which ones were worth our time. She introduced me to her coworkers at the library, people who'd known her for years but never asked too many questions about her past. I brought her to staff parties at the cafe, proudly introducing her as my sister. The word felt strange at first, sister, but the more I said it, the more natural it became. 1 year after I'd first walked into that barn, we had a small gathering to celebrate. Mr. Morrison came, along with a few friends Sarah had made in town, and some co-workers from my cafe. We stood by Rose's grave and took turns sharing what she'd meant to us. She gave me a home when I had nothing, Sarah said. She saw me as a person worth saving, worth protecting, worth loving. She didn't have to do any of that. She could have called the police that first morning and let the system handle me. But she chose compassion over convenience. She chose love over fear. She gave me a sister, I added. She made sure I wouldn't be alone. She couldn't save me when I was a child, but she saved what she could. She preserved my family so that when I was old enough, when I was ready, I could find my way home. That night, as Sarah and I sat on the porch of the trailer watching the sun set over the mountains, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. Do you think she knew that this would work, that we'd actually become family? I thought about the careful planning Rose had done, the specific instructions she'd left, the way she'd arranged for Mr. Morrison to bring me here personally. Yeah, I said. I think she knew exactly what she was doing. She was betting on love being stronger than anger, on family being more important than secrets. I wish we could have known her, Sarah said. Both of us, together. I wish she could see this. Me too, but in a way, we do know her. She's in this land, in this home she made for you, in the choice she gave us to find each other. Every decision she made was about protecting us, about giving us a chance. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm glad you're here, Maya. I'm glad you chose to stay. I'm glad you were here waiting, I said. I spent my whole life thinking I was alone. Turns out I had a sister the whole time. 2 years later, Sarah graduated with her master's degree in library science, and I was there cheering louder than anyone else in the audience. She got a promotion at the Whitefish Library, moving into a position as head librarian. We talked about maybe building a second small house on the property so we could both have more space while staying close. The barn remained Sarah's sanctuary, the place where she'd healed and grown and learned to trust again. The trailer became my space, which I renovated with help from local contractors, decorated with photos of both of us and Rose, creating a visual history of a family that had found each other against impossible odds. We learned that Rose had kept journals and Sarah had them stored in the barn. Reading through them, we discovered a woman who'd loved deeply and made mistakes and carried enormous guilt about the daughter she'd lost and the granddaughter she couldn't save. But we also found hope in those pages. Entries where she wrote about Sarah's progress, about her dreams for my future, about her belief that somehow we'd find our way to each other. One entry, dated 6 months before Rose died, read, I've made so many mistakes in my life. I pushed Jennifer away with my stubbornness and pride. I failed to get Maya out of that terrible system. But I saved Sarah, and maybe that counts for something. Maybe keeping her safe and helping her heal will be enough. I pray that when Maya comes here, and she will come, I've made sure of that, she'll see Sarah not as an obligation, but as a gift. They're sisters. They deserve to know each other. She gave us everything we needed, Sarah said, as we read through the final journal entry, written just days before Rose died. She gave us each other. The property in Montana wasn't just an inheritance. It was a second chance, a bridge across years of separation and loss. It was proof that family could be found in the most unexpected places. That home wasn't always where you started, but sometimes where you ended up. And every time I walked across that grass toward the barn where my sister lived, I thought about the lawyer's words on that first day. Your grandmother wanted you to make a choice about what to do with it. I'd chosen family. I'd chosen home. I'd chosen to honor the legacy of a woman who'd sacrificed her own peace of mind to protect a girl who wasn't even her granddaughter by blood. And standing there in Montana with mountains in the distance and my sister's light glowing warm in the barn windows, I knew I'd chosen right. Rose had given us more than property. She'd given us each other, and in doing so, she'd given us both the one thing we'd been missing our entire lives, a place to belong. Thank you so much for listening to this story about sisters, secrets, and second chances. If it touched your heart, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world to me and helps us keep sharing these stories. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever discovered family you didn't know existed? Or maybe you've had to make a difficult choice about what home really means. Share your story below. This community is built on real experiences and supporting each other through the unexpected twists life throws at us. And click on one of the 2 stories on your screen right now. They're just as powerful as this one, and I promise you won't regret it. Until next time, remember that family isn't always about who you expected. Sometimes it's about who shows up when you need them most.